Hey, how's it going, YouTube? Jimmie Walker here again. Today for this tutorial I'm going to show you how to model a handgun. Once again, we're going to try and aim for a fairly low amount of triangles in it, and I'll show you how to do the texturing and everything like that. This will actually be a multi-part video. I don't know how many parts yet, possibly 3 or 4 at most. So without further ado, let's get into it. So in this tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and model the Ruger Super Red Hawk, and some of these, I'm like, you can use them. There's nothing wrong with that. This one's actually really good because the resolution's fairly high. So I'm going to go ahead and open those in new tabs. Anytime you're modeling any kind of weapon or anything that you need a really high texture map for, it's best to, like this one right here is 5214 by 2726. It's good to go ahead and get some of those, so this way you can use those as texture maps. So I'm going to go ahead and save this image, and once again I'm going to save these under the tutorial folder where my previous tutorial talked about the cell phone. So I'm just going to hit save, and I'm going to open this up. The biggest thing is that you need to be able to zoom in and see everything with clarity. If you can't see this with clarity, then it's not really a good texture map to use because of the fact that you'll start getting pixelation. This one not only can we use it as a texture map, but we can also use it as a profile as well to be able to model it from. So I'm actually going to use this one as both. This one's nice, but if we save the image, let me just do this real quick. So you can see that as I'm zooming in, this is already becoming very pixelated. And so if you were to try to use this as a texture map, one of the problems that you're going to get is you're going to get some of this pixelation, and it really won't look as clean as what you'd expect it to. The only advantage about, like, if I were to use this one is the fact that I could use both sides and apply that as a texture map. That's the only advantage that I would have. But as far as anything else goes, it's really not something that you'd want to use. So I need to see if I can find another side to this one. Because we need high resolution, I'm going to go into Tools. We'll go to Size, and we're just going to do anything larger than 2 megapixels, which is basically 1080p, basically. So this one's good, but the only problem is that it doesn't have the exact side view that I need to be able to make a texture map that I want. However, the fact that both of these are from the same website, I might be able to actually visit the website and see if they have other views of it that I can use. See, there's the one that we got, and unfortunately they do not have it. So one thing, I could use this one. In theory, it'd be a little difficult to do, but it is still doable. I'm going to go ahead and save all 3 of these images. And the reason why I'm going to do this, because I can actually go back in here and manipulate it in Photoshop to make it look the way I want it. So let's go ahead and save this. Oh yeah, see, that's just a thumbnail. So let me go ahead and open the image in a new tab. And once again, it's just a thumbnail. So I could zoom in and take the pictures that way. That's just kind of a pain. I really don't feel like it. If you don't feel like it, that's cool. You can be more like me, which is always alright. So let's see if we can find a decent texture map. One other thing I also want to mention, it doesn't have to be a revolver. I'm only doing that because on my spare time I also sell some of these assets on the asset store. Generally ones I'm doing for tutorials, those are going to be free. So something like this, I'm just going to roll with what I got. I'm going to go ahead and save, was it this one I saved? Or, yeah, it was this one. So I'm going to go ahead and save this one. And this way we have both of these that we can use, and we can just keep the texture map uniform. If you want to get like a front view to give it a little bit more detail, you can most definitely do that. It's a little extra work. In some cases, it's not really necessary or needed. So once we've gotten the images that we need, then is what we can do is we can actually... Oh, wait a minute. Did I just see one? Maybe. Let's see. What do we have here? Yeah, so see, this is actually going to be an excellent one to use because of the fact that it's a high resolution. So if I zoom in, oh yeah. So this is actually going to be perfect to use, and it even has the metal look to it. In some cases, if you can actually find like both sides of it from the same person, like this, I mean, that's just perfect. So I'm actually going to zoom in. Oops. It's a little pixelated, but I can use it. And if you're wondering how I just did that, it's basically just holding down Control, hitting plus to zoom in, and Control minus to zoom out. It's actually really simple to do. So, sorry about that. Okay, so once we got that, it's the same thing as before last time. The only difference is we're going to go into the side view. We're going to import the image plane. And I actually have this saved under tutorial, so we want this one right here. We'll open that up, and now we have this. Now I'm going to go ahead and move this back, like so. And we're basically just going to start modeling. We'll probably just start with the hammer right here. Should be pretty simple to model, not much to it. So you can add a lot of detail, and I just moved this the wrong way. There we go. Nope, I had it right. It just took a second. So you can add a lot of detail to this. You can look for just a hammer and model it from that. And to do that real simply, basically all you do is just, like we got the Ruger Super Red Hawk right here. So all I would do is just type in hammer. And once that loads, if it will ever load, there we go. You can find a hammer on here. You can add the extra detail. It may not really necessarily be necessary. So like right here, you can see it's pretty much flat. There's not a whole lot of detail that goes into it. So if you want to take that extra step, by all means, you can do that. But, for all purposes, I'm not going to. I'm just going to show you the basics on how I model for video games and projects I might be working on. So anytime you're modeling, basically all I do is I just follow this contour. So I'm going to go into face, and then I'm going to, based on selecting all of these faces right here, and I'm also selecting the bottom, and I'm just deselecting these. So this way the only ones that are selected are on the bottom. And then I just start extruding. Whenever I get to here, I'll usually actually create like a little gap like this, so that's why I can extrude this back face right along here. In Maya and some of the other 3 applications, I don't know which ones will do this specifically, but if you notice, before I had to come up here and click on this to extrude the edge, and now you just see it automatically extruding. I'm actually pressing the letter G, and that basically will redo whichever last key you hit, which is how I'm able to do this so quickly and flawlessly. So from that last image, we can see that the hammer is fairly flat. All we have to do is just select these vertices right here, and then we'll scale them down, and then we'll move them forward, like so. And then for the little detail, if you absolutely must have to have it, then you can just do that. Now when you smooth this, you're going to get this weird shape-like thing, and as you can see, the hammer right here, it doesn't have that. It's actually fairly square. To be able to fix that, we'll go into the edge loop tool, and we'll just keep that real tight. And if you want, you can actually add another one right about there. And this way, this is all flat and it's tight and it looks great. If you want to do the same thing down here, let me go and just show you this real quick. The reason why I'm not using the edge loop to bring this down like this, because yeah, this looks a lot better and it's more square. But if you look back here, you start running into little, I guess you'd say, errors. There are actually several ways to fix those, and I'm going to go over the one that I usually do. So let me just finish making this a little bit more square. Normally is what I would do is I'd actually start cutting into the polygon shape itself and work it from there. But in this case, just to keep it simple, I'm going to show you another way of doing that. So I'm just going to finish modeling out the hammer right here real quick. And the reason why I'm not worried about the bottom is because I'm just following the top, and I'll actually go back in and model the bottom of it later on. So I'm just going to move these right about there, deselect those, and I'll move this one up. And so now when, oops, wrong button, go back in here. So now when we do this, this looks a lot better. We still need to add an edge loop to the back part. Put it right about there. You select the vertices. I'm going to move those back just a little bit. I'm going to move these up. I'm going to move these up too. And then I'll move these back right about here. And then I'll move these right about there. So that's all there is to making the hammer. And if you want to animate this, all you have to do is just change the pivot point. We'll move it down, say, right about here. And so now, if you're going to animate this, you can just simply move it back, and it will animate accordingly like it should. Sometimes when you're working on these scenes, you can have a lot of stuff that just kind of clutters everything up, and it can actually be a major, major pain. So one of the other things that's very helpful to do is under your channel box. I don't know what it is in Blender or 3ds Max or anything like that, but in Maya it's under channel box, and you can just simply create a new layer and assign the selected objects. If you forgot to select the objects, that's no problem. You can simply click on the object that you want to add to this layer, and then right click, and you'll just go down to add selected objects. I'm going to go ahead and change the name to hammer. We'll hit save. And so now if you need to get it out of the way, you can just simply turn on or turn off viewing. So the next thing, let's go ahead and model the scope up here. This is actually going to be fairly easy because this is mainly just a series of cylinders, more or less. So I'm going to create a poly cylinder, and we'll rotate this 90, and then we'll scale it down. Now, I'm not going to mess with any of the vertices yet, and the reason why, because under the same tab, I'm going to change the amount of subdivisions it has. I'm going to change it down to, I'm going to say 8. You can do 10, you can do 12, you can do whatever. I just like to try and keep it low, because in the end, the triangles right here, the tris, I want to try and keep that total amount as low as possible, and ideally I don't want to go over 5,000 with this weapon, which I might end up, with the scope and everything, I might end up going around 7,000 or 8,000, but I definitely do not want to exceed that. If you're under the attribute editor, you can simply click on polycylinder 1 and you can change the subdivision axes right there. You can change other things too, but I usually do that in through the modeling on the viewport. So once I have the amount of subdivisions that I want, then I'll just scale this out. Now for this, I'm actually going to make this part of the same thing, and I'm just going to extrude. So when I extrude, let me just move this out a little bit. I do not know why I just did that. Going to extrude it down till it's right about where I want it, and then I'm going to move it back. And then we'll extrude again, and this time we'll actually extrude out. And then I don't want these selected, so what I want to do is take these right here and extrude those out. Now the reason why I moved the other ones back is because I actually want to keep this, I guess you say this flat area right here, and I want to keep that actually fairly sharp, because you can see right here in the photo that that does have some sharp edges. So I'm actually going to add a ring right here in the middle, and then right about here I'll add an edge loop. So when we smooth it, as you can see, now we have that. One thing I do want to go over is the edge loop I just created. That is not what I wanted. There we go. If you have an edge loop, the closer it is to whatever you're trying to create a tight curve on, the closer it is, the tighter it's going to be, as you can see. So now this has a real tight profile. In this case, I really don't want that. I just want to move it right about there, so it still has a little bit of a curve, just not much. Right here, we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to add an edge loop here in the middle. Then I'll add one on the outside of each ring. And then to keep the outside fairly tight, we'll just move one and keep it right there as close to the edge as possible. And we'll do the same thing on this back end, right about there. So now when we smooth it, as you can see now, we actually have the upper part of the scope. So that actually matches up really well. It's very nice. Okay. So with transparency on, is what I want to do now is, actually I think I'm just going to hide this. Oh, come on, you can do it. We'll go into channel box, we'll add an object, and we'll go ahead and hide it for the time being. So I'm going to go ahead and model this bottom part. And I could just create another, I could just duplicate the one that I just had, but why? This is just so much easier where you can just model from fresh. And so we'll model that down. Actually need to move this back, then we'll move this down. So actually that fits out pretty well. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just create the scope as this one piece right here. I don't really need to go anything real crazy with this center piece right here, and I'll explain why a little bit later on. For now, I'm just going to work on the bottom part. But we'll do the same thing that we did before. And then we'll scale this up. And then we'll move this out. We will scale this down just a hair. Probably right about there. And then we'll move that out. And we're going to move it right about there. Let's do the same thing over here. Now this one actually, if you see, it actually has a slight curve to it. So I'm going to put I'm going to stop the extrusion right here. I'm going to do another extrusion. I'm going to scale up. And then you can kind of see where it kind of flattens out a little bit. Then it has a sharp edge. So I'm going to do another extrusion about that far out. And I'm going to duplicate it or redo the last option one last time. And so let's go ahead and do an edge loop. Do one right. Oh, come on. There we go. Do one right there. I'm just going to throw a few edge loops right here. Now this one doesn't really have a smooth profile, so I'm going to keep this one kind of tight. And you'll notice that this actually has these rings. Those are actual indentions in the scope itself. I'm not really worried about adding those, although you could to give it more detail. But it's not really necessary. Let's see. So I need to add more edge loops. Just go and click on that. I'm going to add one right about here. This one I'll keep tight. And then we need to add one in between these rings, like so. So now when we view it, it actually doesn't look half bad. It almost looks like part of a toilet plunger, and I am happy with that. So once we've done that, I'm going to go ahead and put those other objects back in the scene. So I'm going to add the selected object to layer 1. I'm going to change this to scope and then hit save. So now whenever we turn that off, we're actually turning off both scopes. And I know you're noticing this where I'll click on turning off that and it's still there until I move. Sometimes Maya has hiccups. This just happens to be one of the times it's having a hiccup because, you know, lol. So, yeah, see, this should be selected, but it's not. Yay. So I'm going to deselect it, and it's still not popping up. So that's okay. I can go, no, I can't. It is really not popping up. It just hates me today. Okay, so this is one of the things that you're going to run into if you're ever using Maya. Um, One of the easiest things to do is I'm going to go ahead and save this as Red Hawk. Sometimes you have to do this, you just have to close the application, reopen it. While that's closing down and we're working on everything, let's go ahead and see if we can find Red Hawk ammo. Now, for the ammo, it's going to be the exact same thing. Try to find large images, because this way you can use the bullet as a texture map uh, as well as designing it for the video game profile. If I can spell, there we go. All right, so something like this would probably work. I'm like, it doesn't have to be like the exact thing, but I'm kind of picky. I like trying to find bullets where you can also see the bottom face, just because that way I can integrate it in the texture map and make everything look a little more realistic. See, like this. This is beautiful. This is what I like. And we even have bullets down here that, I'm like, we could model from those. Don't really need to, because there's not really a whole lot that's needed to model a bullet. But it's really just this back part that I'm interested in, because of the fact that it has the detail I want. So I'm going to save that image. I'm going to save it as ammo. And there we go. So, yeah, this is like the most awesome thing ever. It's like Maya's not even closing now. Yay. Oh, there we go. One other thing I also want to kind of mention while I'm thinking about it. Now, I'm just going through these images just for tutorial purposes. One thing you need to be aware of if you're ever using any of this stuff for a texture map, or maybe it's for a project you're doing in school or something like that, you have to really keep in mind that some of these, they are copyrighted. So you can't just say like, oh, well, I'm going to take this, I'm going to make $20,000 off it. You can't just do that, because of the fact that it is copyrighted and you don't have permission to use those textures or those maps or anything like that. I'm actually going to have to start Task Manager. That is awesome. Alright, so I'm going to look for Maya right here in process. I love it when that happens, because, it's Maya. It's like the best, and it still has flaws. So yeah, just keep that in mind, as far as applications that like to screw up and mess with you and make you lose sleep overnight and steal your wallet. So we're going to go back to, oh man, I hope it's saved. Let's go back into desktop. We're going to go into tutorial. Red Hawk, sweet, it did save. Okay, so now that I got that, yeah, see, now we can do it. So we'll continue on where I left off. And we'll just scale this down. For knobs, you have two options on how you can do this. You can just make this go all the way through, or you can actually go in and you can make them individual knobs. If you're going to do that, I wouldn't recommend having the subdivision axis any higher than 8. And if you notice, I keep it right here in the middle. The reason for that is if I'm going to have individual knobs, I'm actually just going to move one side of the vertices over. Then I'm going to... Oh, it didn't do it. We'll go in here to... I believe it's modify. No. Let's see, where is it? I should know this. You would think I would know this. Duplicate special. It is under edit. Okay, so I feel just all sorts of special. Now, we want to scale it across X. And as you can see, I already have this selected. So we'll just hit duplicate special. And it did not... Yes, it did. Why is it not... Control G, Control D, there it goes. Okay, I don't know why it was fighting me. Yeah, I have no idea. But either way, all I did was just group the object by itself, and then I just duplicated that group accordingly. So I'm going to click on these individual items. I'm going to move them out. This way I can delete these groups. And I'm actually going to create all these as groups later on. And I mean, it's just a way of keeping everything a little bit more tidy, and it's easier to import into Unity whenever everything's a group. So this way, if you change the scaling under the imports, it just works out so much better. So for this right here, this is the fun part. I'm going to create an edge loop right here. I'm going to create an edge loop right here. And the reason why, because this, I believe, is actually attached to the scope itself. So then I do not want to select that. No! Why are you doing this to me, Maya? So I'm just going to select these faces. And as what I'm going to do with these faces selected, I'm actually going to extrude them. So I'm just going to extrude just a little bit. There we go. And now that I've done that, I can actually extrude outwards, and not so much, Jimmie. Extrude down just a little bit, and I will take these. I'm going to flatten them down, and then I'm going to move this up right about here. So that doesn't quite line up like I want it to, so that's no big deal. I'll just move these forward. Actually, I know a better way to do this. I'm just going to take these vertices and move these back right about there. There we go. I can sleep now. Okay. So we got this, and this kind of protrudes out a little bit, but that's not really a big deal. What is a big deal is, as you can see right here, we actually have two faces on this upper scope, but we can only attach it to one face in the middle. Now, you could do this, just add an edge loop and be like, hey, I'm done, I'm a master. But when you go in to smooth it, that's where you're going to run into a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add this scope to a new layer, and I'll delete the layer later. I'm actually going to have to cut the polygon. And so I'm going to start right here on the corner, and I'll go up to the center and finish it right there. The reason why I don't just start like right here in the center, just cut straight, because then on these faces you're going to have more than 5 sides. Video games, they do not like anything that's basically more than 4-sided objects. So a lot of times I'll keep my faces 4-sided for that reason. So with this new edge right here that's just beautiful looking, I'm like, this best edge ever I've ever seen. I don't know about you. But I'll go back in here into view, and I'll go into transparency. That actually looks like it lines up pretty good. So the next thing I need to do is I actually need to add an edge loop to this right about here. And the whole purpose of this is this way I can delete these bottom faces, and I can actually delete these 2 faces. And so now all I have to do is combine these 2 together, like so. And then I can select these edges, and then I can select these edges, and then all I have to do is bridge them. Now, I'm going to get an error here, and I'll explain why in just a minute. I did not get an error. I was not expecting. Oh, duh, because I have that one. I am just all sorts of special today. Can I get an applause? Thank you. Alright, so I'm going to add an edge loop right here. And the reason why I'm adding that edge loop is because I want to try and keep the profile fairly tight. And it's going to be the same thing with this. This actually overlaps that, and I don't want it to. So I'm just going to move that in like so. Okay, there we go. Now, let's see what we got as far as looks. So, you can leave it like that. You can add some more edge loops and make it a little bit tighter. That's completely up to you. Now, I am going to add some edge loops just because in the picture right here, let me rotate. In the picture right here, you can see that the front and the back sides of it are actual, they're real tight. So I'm going to add a real tight edge loop right there, then one more right about there. And that gives us the shape that we're looking for. And right there kind of like blends in with it. So realistically, that right there, I'm actually happy with. I'm actually really happy with that. I can live with that. So the next thing we're going to model, let me just add this layer to the scope, and then I'll delete this layer. There we go. And let me go and hide the scope from there. So this section right here, if you're going to make this gun where it's like you have an added option to put the scope on there, you can, what I would do is I'd actually leave these little humps out of it. And this way you can actually like have customizable mods that can just quote unquote attach to it. Because whenever you attach something to a game object, it basically just looks at an entire group, and that's what it attaches to. So I'm not really too worried about adding these indentions. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, we're actually going to be using this for a texture map. You don't need to, but if you're going to, then you could. There's all sorts of ways you can do it. The beautiful thing about 3D modeling is there's not one set way of doing anything. But I'm going to go ahead and model these real quick, because I'm sure y'all are like, come on, dude, just get on with the stupid tutorial. And it's like, okay, I'm sorry. Don't hurt me. Alright, so we're going to add that. Let's go ahead and just give this a subdivision axis of 10. We'll scale this down. Scale it right about there. And then under the vertices, we're going to flatten those out because this is actually pretty flat. Alright, and you can do the same thing up here. It's not just like one size fits all kind of thing. You know, you can do all sorts of things. I'm just going to... Actually, no, I think I'm going to cheat a little bit. So I'm going to duplicate this object and find out which one. So that's the X that I'm scaling. And I'll go ahead and, oh come on, flip that around and move it right about there. And I'm going to flatten this down. Something kind of like that. Oh, how dare you. Alright, vertex. And I'll move this down. I'm going to select the object, and I'm going to scale it out. About like that. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is duplicate these objects and just move them back. In the next lesson, I'm actually going to go further in depth with how to make these look a little bit better, give them sharper edges, and basically just give them a good amount of detail. Because on these scopes right here, they don't have this upper curve. It actually follows the contour of the scope itself. And it doesn't have this hump up here, as you can see. So, next lesson, that's what I'm going to start working on, and I'll finish up on the scope, and then we'll be able to get started on the rest of the handgun. So, hope to see you.